So what I wanted to do here is have a discussion about Marvel's first black superhero, the Blue Marvel, Adam Brashear. However, before we get into this video, I want to let people know ahead of time that some of the phrases used in this story to describe African Americans and other non-white cultures may be considered a little offensive, and while the intention is not to be malicious, I'm keeping these phrases in this video as they serve to establish the significance of both the story itself, as well as the perception the world had of Blue Marvel and the way he viewed himself. So Adam Brashear was created by Kevin Grevioux, who was also the mastermind behind both the Underworld and I, Frankenstein series, as well as a writer for Superman, Batman, and others. In an interview with The Source, a digital and print media hub for news relating to urban music, African American issues, youth culture, and politics, Grevioux had stated that the character of Adam Brashear was as much a reflection of himself as he was a wholly new character for Marvel Comics. What I mean here is that as a graduate of Howard University, Kevin Grevioux' portfolio consists of a stint as a football player, as well as a bachelor's degree in microbiology with minors in chemistry and psychology, in addition to a master's in genetic engineering. Furthermore, as an African American born in 1962 and growing up during the early days of the civil rights movement, in his youth, Kevin Grevioux experienced racism from various directions and as such, folded these concepts over into his writing of the Blue Marvel character. In addition to this, during the same interview, the question was asked about his view of diversity in comics regarding superheroes of color created by writers of color. In his answer, Grevioux had stated that to him, while there were multiple black artists, there were very few writers who are black. While he acknowledged that this isn't necessarily indicative of a systematic issue of racism, the problem arises when writers create content based on their own personal experiences. As a result, the most prominent black superheroes in Marvel Comics in particular are Sam Wilson, Black Panther, and Storm, only one of whom could be considered a wildly powerful being. In an effort to rectify this, Grevioux had sought to create a black superhero that, as he put it, could sit at the table of Superman, Martian Manhunter, Shazam, and the Sentry, and hold his own as a character that could rise to almost any occasion and save the world, but also had a level of intelligence that could rival Marvel's smartest beings, including Reed Richards, Tony Stark, and Amadeus Cho. As a result, in November of 2008, he released a semi-period 5-part miniseries titled The Legend of Blue Marvel, which took a page from Paul Jenkins and Jay Lee's The Sentry and introduced Adam Brashear as a superhero who existed prior to the dawn of characters like Black Panther, Spider-Man, and the X-Men, but left the scene due to the culture of racism in the United States during the early 1960s. Having said that, the Legend of Blue Marvel bounces back and forth between the 1960s and the events immediately following Civil War and the death of Captain America, in that during this time, Tony Stark is director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Carol Danvers leads the Avengers branch-off team called the Mighty Avengers, and the roster of the main Avengers team itself consists of the Sentry Robert Reynolds, Tony Stark, Ares the Greek god of war, Black Widow, Yellow Jacket Hank Pym, and She-Hulk. In the opening events of this story, the group is in the midst of a battle with a being named Ant-Man, someone who will be explored further in the story. But the significance of this battle is that it serves to set the stage for the coming events by establishing a kind of Blue Marvel is the only one who can save us idea, and that the Avengers are being completely ravaged by Ant-Man. The Sentry, for example, is a being on par with the Hulk even in his angriest form, but against Ant-Man, he poses no true threat and is easily taken down. In addition to this, Ares is an Olympian and the son of Zeus and Hera with prodigious skill in battle. While his strength is less than both Thor and the Sentry, he, along with She-Hulk, Carol Danvers, and everyone else, is virtually useless here. And so with Iron Man demanding to know why the Ant-Man is here, both his motives and the first mention of Blue Marvel come when he responds that his purpose is to bring salvation to the planet Earth, and that not even Blue Marvel was able to stop him when the two had previously fought. And so as the battle comes to a close, the indication here is that Ant-Man was on a timetable with a limit to how long he could exist, or at the very least, fight under these conditions, which becomes apparent when he effectively dissolves and fades away. Now, recovering from the battle, Grevioux continues to tease us with the power of Blue Marvel when the Sentry comments on how powerful Ant-Man was and that he has never experienced a being on such a scale. Furthermore, Tony Stark pulls the group together, arguing that because such a being exists, the only way for them to defeat him is to understand who he is and where his power comes from. Now from here, we jump back to 1962 with our first depiction of Blue Marvel himself in a battle with the Ant-Man. Now the reasoning behind the Ant-Man's actions largely remain ambiguous here, in that the statements between the two of them as they do battle indicate that Ant-Man intends a larger end-of-the-world kind of scenario, with Blue Marvel doing what he can to stop him. Furthermore, as he's depicted here, Blue Marvel has all the hallmarks of a traditional hero, and that he refuses to give up in the midst of the battle. He does what he can to keep innocents protected, and he also attempts to talk Anti-Man down from his rampage. However, as a true villain, Anti-Man is the antithesis of Blue Marvel in that he's unwavering from his goal of presumed genocide and has no regard for the lives of the innocent people around him. Now, the reason I'm drawing your attention to this is that the way Kevin Graveau depicts Blue Marvel here is that he's not an anti-hero blurring the line between right and wrong, and instead, he is, by all standards of measurement, a genuine hero. And so the dichotomies between Blue Marvel and Anti-Man come to a head when we learn that according to Anti-Man, humanity is a victim of its own viciousness, callousness, and warmongering. While there are good individuals out there, in the mind of Anti-Man, all humans are the same, and that if humanity won't correct the error of its own morality, then he intends to force them to by wiping them all out. Now, all of this again comes to a head as the two battle, with Blue Marvel coming out victorious, but the world also learning that he's a black man. At this point, Graveau begins to move the story away from the basic premise of superheroes battling one another to focusing on the fallout of America learning that the most powerful superhero in the world is an African American. Picking up with Robert McNamara, the real-world Secretary of Defense under President John F. Kennedy during the 1960s, alongside President Kennedy himself and the rest of his defense cabinet, we're provided the background of Blue Marvel in that his name is Adam Brashear. He graduated at the top of his class from Cornell with a PhD in electrical engineering and theoretical physics, with McNamara even going so far as to state that he's not your average colored. From here, the focus switches to his power, where we're told that his actions have saved the world on multiple occasions. In one instance, he knocked a meteor the size of Arkansas off its collision course with Earth. During the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, when the United States and Russia almost went to war over the placement of Soviet nuclear weapons in Cuba, as part of the U.S. naval blockade around Cuba, the USS Enterprise was damaged by a Russian submarine, at which point Blue Marvel carried the ship from the Atlantic back to its port in the Newport News shipyards. These escapades, combined with the fact that he had prevented the premature detonation of the Polaris nuclear ballistics missile during the famous 1962 failure, meant that as far as McNamara was concerned, as the Secretary of Defense, Adam Brashear represents a level of power they can't contain, and that if the fledgling civil rights movement were to rally him to their cause, the result would be a superpowered African American fighting against the government as opposed to fighting on behalf of it. And so what we do here is begin focusing on the backstory of the relationship between Adam Brashear and the Anti-Man by establishing that the two were friends at one point and that both served together in Korea during the Cold War. With Adam Brashear picked up by the Secret Service at the request of the president, on his way to the White House, he flashes back to his time during the war. At some point during his tour with the US Marines, enemy soldiers ambushed their platoon. During the attack, a man named Connor was injured and Adam had intervened, saving his life in the process and running off the enemy soldiers. Now, transitioning back to the war room and President Kennedy, the view of Adam Brashear comes into play when one of the generals refers to him as a porch monkey. Now, the racism that Brashear has experienced over the course of his life is further compounded on when it's revealed that during his time in Korea, he was subjected to the taunts of other soldiers due to the color of his skin. Now, this in addition is compounded on when we learn that during the early 1960s, with the United States on the cusp of social unrest as a result of the civil rights movement, in addition to the racism that he has experienced from white society, black society has also demonstrated a hatred towards him due to the fact that he will not ally himself with the civil rights movement and instead desires to remain a bipartisan hero protecting the world. Now, what happens next is extremely important and effectively sets the stage for everything that comes later on. As the president who did more for minorities than any other president in history, Graveau incorporated this into the story by having Kennedy provide an impassioned speech and saying that society could have easily dealt with the racial issues sooner by introducing desegregation, eliminating Jim Crow laws, but that this was never done because the status quo was acceptable to white society. However, when a superpowered African American arrived on the scene with the power to not only force the hand of social change, but do so with humanity having no way to stop him, the attitude of white society shifted from acceptance of the status quo to fear that the status quo could be removed and there would be nothing they could do about it. And so, seeing a race war looming on the horizon due to Blue Marvel's continued existence as a superhero on Earth, and because the president serves at the pleasure of the American people, Adam Brashear is called into the White House where President Kennedy speaks with him directly. Informing Brashear that his presence as a hero means a potential race war between those who want to keep things as they are and those who want change, Blue Marvel is asked to step down from his role as a superhero. And so while the question from Blue Marvel is how long this is supposed to last, the indication from President Kennedy is that after handing Adam Brashear the Congressional Medal of Freedom, that he's being asked to step down from his life as a superhero indefinitely. With that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end. I know it's a cliffhanger, but what we're going to do is we're going to pick up with the second half of this, and we're going to get into the current events with Tony Stark's search of Blue Marvel and how it is he's able to bring him back and have him become a member of the superhero community again. With that being said, I will catch you guys later. Peace.